We've got a good group here, and so I'm going to get it kicked off. Um, I'm Tatum Tummins, Senior Product Manager at Kion, for those that I haven't met. And today we're going to be talking all about AI and specifically the power of AI for FinOps. And we're going to talk about some high level, three use cases that are good for folks that get started. And for folks that I've never met before, I always like to kick off a little bit of my background. So before coming to Kion as a product manager, I was a FinOps practitioner myself for 7, almost 8 years at a large healthcare company. And I like to say I grew up professionally with FinOps, and I've been along kind of the ride as FinOps has evolved and drastically changed and grown over the years. And what we're seeing right now with AI's impact on the FinOps industry is a really pivotal moment and kind of where we're headed. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to do this topic today. So, for the quick look at the agenda, we're going to kick off by doing a quick recap of last week's data that we got from the State of FinOps survey from the FinOps Foundation. If someone from Kion wouldn't mind dropping the link to that report in the chat, I'm sure many of you are familiar with that, and maybe if you were on the call last week when it was shared. But if not, we'll do a quick kind of run through of what we learned with that data. And then we'll transition into kind of three use cases for AI, how I like to help bucket them into themes to help people think about those use cases. And then we're going to get into a demo. And the majority, or at least half of our time together today, is going to be me going through kind of various examples of how AI can and will continue to make impact for practitioners and their organizations. And then we'll come back to the PowerPoint and just do a quick recap and a what's new and next with Kion specifically. So with that, let's get started with the State of FinOps recap. And before we talk about what we learned just last week in the report that was just shared out, I think it's important to remind folks with where we were essentially a year ago today. And last year, when the 2025 survey came out, practitioners were asked, what are your top three priorities today? And they came back with not surprising results. People were still focused on optimization. They were still trying to allocate their cloud spend, and they were still trying to get a little bit better at forecasting their spend. When they were then asked, well, what are you going to care more about over the next 12 months? Two new things popped up, and that was FinOps governance and policy at scale, and then managing cost beyond public cloud. And if you think about where we are, why those things might have been popping up, there were some key developments that were happening. So at the beginning of last year, the FinOps Foundation introduced the idea of scopes, and so the different areas of technology that you can and should be managing spend. Focus 1.2 and increased adoption and awareness. And folks were really starting to mature in their practices, which is one of the reasons you saw governance and policy at scale jump to the top of the list. But what I want to note is last year, AI was present. It was a part of the FinOps industry 12 months ago, but it was not yet critical for most organizations. Flash forward to what we learned just last week, and you'll see that now in 2026, when folks say, well, what does the next 12 months look like in terms of what's going to increase in priority for you? Both facets of AI pop up. That's FinOps for AI, and it's also AI for FinOps. And so it's clear that AI is now having a really big impact and a role in practitioners' lives. And I'm seeing that every day as well with our prospects and customers and the use cases they're looking to solve or the questions that they're asking. And that's essentially the origin of why I wanted to have this webinar today. And so what I'm going to do for the next two slides is dive into the specific AI data we've got from last week, and then we'll jump into the use cases. So we now know that the market is reorienting around AI. And what that means is if you look at the evolution, so 2 years ago in 24, only 31% of respondents reported that they were currently managing AI in some way or managing spend. Last year, it jumped to 63%. And now nearly every respondent indicates that they are currently managing some sort of AI spend at their organization. And folks are reporting that AI cost management is now the number one skill that they're looking to develop or get on their team. But there are lots of challenges that are still presenting folks. That's with visibility, showing ROI, and the value they're getting from their investment. But what I want to clarify is that although managing AI spend is clearly a top priority, so is the concept of how do you leverage AI to accelerate your FinOps practice. You see in the bottom right there, when folks were asked, how important is using AI in your FinOps practice, 81% of folks said medium or high in terms of importance. And so it's clear there's a dual expectation now in FinOps where you have your FinOps for AI, which is about governing and managing your spend and measuring the value of that investment. But there's also AI for FinOps, which is how do I increase productivity and elevate the impact that my teams are having? And so the bottom line here is that AI is now firmly a part of FinOps across almost every organization at this point, but there's still going to be some challenges to navigate over the course of this year, and there's going to be a lot of learning and education that needs to take place as practitioners learn on how to use this effectively. And so now I want to transition to specifically that AI for FinOps piece, and that's why we're here today. And I want to clarify to start that AI is not a replacement for FinOps expertise. It's simply a multiplier, an amplifier, whatever term you want to use. It's trying to get a little bit more efficiency out of your teams. You can see one of the companies that were quoted in the data shared that for them, AI for FinOps is their topmost priority as they figure out how to drive more productivity at their organization. When you think about who's using AI today, I kind of bucket it in these two terms, and the foundation does something similar as today, the heavy users of AI in their FinOps processes tend to correlate with those more mature organizations. Typically, larger enterprise organizations are already experimenting or have established processes with AI. But what we're seeing, both what folks are telling us and just how the adoption cycle will typically work for things like this, is that over the course of this year, maybe it's 18 months, all maturity levels, all organization sizes are going to start to identify use cases that make sense for them. And it will look different at every organization. And even today in the demo portion, we're going to talk about, a wide scale of different use cases, and not all of them are going to apply to everybody. But by the end of this year, I think we're going to have mapped out use cases for all organizations and all maturity levels. Within the survey, you'll see that the foundation reported on a few of those early use cases that folks are talking about, and they're saying, "Hey, anomaly detection, using natural language to query my data, along with some others." And these are specific use cases that are relevant and are real. But what I'd like to do for our next few slides before we get into the demo is talk about how to maybe group these into general use cases to help folks think about areas of impact. And so I want to talk about essentially how AI shows up in FinOps first and foremost, because for many of you, some of this concepts, AI in general, may be brand new to you. So I want to do kind of an overview of how you can expect to see it within your FinOps practices before we talk about any specifics. And so the first is AI you can talk to. This is probably the concept that people are most familiar with, right? This is asking in natural language questions about your data, translating technical concepts, and summarizing that data. This is everything from asking ChatGPT a prompt to using other types of language models to get information. The next way that you see AI show up in FinOps is AI built directly into your FinOps tools. So think of this as everything from your third-party tools like a Kion to even your native cloud providers with AWS, Azure, GCP. This would be AI or machine learning built into features or built into the applications and tools that you're using. And then lastly is AI that connects your tools. This is often referred to as MCP servers or other things like that, that are essentially taking multiple data sources, including your cloud spend, and combining it with other tool sets and other data sets that you might have at your organization. And it's figuring out how to connect those, operationalize, and automate tasks amongst those tool sets. And so this is a very simplified view, but I hope that it's helpful in terms of how you can think about where AI might show up in your FinOps practice. And now let's talk about why that's valuable and what this means. I like to break down the value that AI brings into three categories: guidance, efficiency, and governance. And I'm going to do one slide on each of these before we jump into the demo, but everything you see today can essentially be bucketed into these three use cases. To start, let's talk a little bit about guidance. So Guidance is how I would define as usability. It's making FinOps a little bit easier for all folks, no matter their maturity level, no matter how new they are to FinOps. What you see on the screen right now is actually Kion's in-app agent that we call Lux. And what I'll draw your attention to are the prompts on the screen. It may seem like a simple addition, but what we're already seeing is for folks that are new to FinOps, they're new to a tool, or maybe they're an adjacent persona like accounting or finance, where FinOps isn't their full-time job, but they have needs, they have data that they would like to be able to go get in a self-service manner. What we're seeing is that AI is kind of opening a new door to making it easier for those folks to be successful in what they need. And so, this idea that I can come in and I can click on a prompt or I can ask a simple question and start to immediately get answers, recommendations, data that I can run with is a really easy on ramp for folks that are really starting out in their journey or are new to FinOps entirely. And so, an example of what this might look like is simply asking any sort of chatbot or agent, hey, why did my cloud cost increase this month? And for some of you, you may already know that answer. You know how to navigate your spend reports and your dashboards. But for many folks, a simple question like this goes a long way in helping them understand their data in a meaningful way. And when you think about outcomes here, it's faster time to value and adoption. It's also, I didn't include this on the slide, but if you think about what it does for your FinOps culture, the more folks you're able to bring together to learn how to ask these questions and understand their data, the more you're elevating the culture of your FinOps practices as a whole. And off that, you're ultimately going to start reducing your dependency on experts. A lot of the organizations that we meet, they have one to two folks that really know how everything works, and it's hard necessarily to get that education at a broad scale. Something like AI starts to bridge that gap. So that's guidance. Now let's talk about efficiency. This is effectively how do I get some information quicker and how do I complete tasks faster? This is where you're really focused on those productivity gains and how to move faster in your organization. This use case has probably the most broad examples in terms of the possibilities are pretty limitless. There's a lot of ways that you can gain efficiencies within your FinOps practice. One example I like to always reference is, we actually had a customer who they take about 90 minutes a month just updating budgets to forecast and going through that process. Now, with something like an in-app agent like Lux, they're able to take a 90-minute process and by simply asking some questions around comparing budget to forecast and making an action plan, Lux will actually go out and update those budgets. And now they've made a 90-minute process a 5-minute process. And those types of use cases really start to stack up as you're able to identify where you might can apply AI to your practices. And so when you think about outcomes for here or for this, task completed in minutes instead of potentially hours, and then faster investigation and decision making. So even if AI isn't necessarily taking an action on your behalf, if I'm able to understand my data just a little bit quicker or a little bit clearer, I'm now able to go make better decisions faster off of that. And so the last use case I want to talk about before I promise, get into the demo and show all the really fun stuff, is AI-driven governance. And so this is the idea of actually relying on AI to help you better understand where you can improve governance and actually create guardrails for your organization. And I'll admit that at the start, this is probably the more mature of the use cases that we're going to talk about today. But I think it's a really important one. And I think for some folks, even just seeing the art of possible, I think is a really important kind of step as you think through your journey of what AI is going to look like. And so what you see on the screen here, and I'm going to demo this real example, so don't worry about trying to like see exactly what the policy says here. But what you see on the screen here is I asked Lux to simply create a policy to clean up my unattached GBS volumes. And it's gone through and created a technical policy that would allow me to do that and implement that automation. And so I threw that as the example question here. And why that's really important is not only am I starting to create governance that's going to clean up, unwanted waste in my organization, help prevent it long term, but it breaks down the technical barrier. I myself am not that technical. I don't know how to write policy in a consistent, reliable way. Something like this allows me to lean on AI to better create those policies and guardrails. And so you start to standardize your governance across your organization without that deep technical expertise, and you can then scale those guardrails across your cloud estate. So those are quickly the three high-level use cases at kind of the macro level. But now I'd like to jump out of PowerPoint and demo some of this live and in action. So I'm going to jump around to a few different places and a few different tools today. I'll try to kind of monitor the chat here, but please submit any Q&A for things that you maybe want to see more of or questions you want to have. But I'm going to start back with that guidance concept that I started with, and I'm going to open up Lux. So this is, for example, this is Kion, for those of you that have never seen it. And I'm going to open up our Lux and App Agent here. And I'm going to start with those prompts that I referenced in terms of guidance. And so assume that I'm a new user, I'm new to FinOps, I'm new to this journey, and I'm not really sure what I'm looking for. These prompts allow me to come in and simply click a button and kind of immediately start to get at least some feedback and understanding of, okay, what am I looking for? And so I get a spend report, and then as this works through, I start to get just, a simple breakdown of what are some highlights, what are my top services, and what I think is really important here is as a new user or someone who's new to this journey, I get some questions or recommendations for other things that I might want to also find out about my data. I also could then quickly open up this spin report and start to make some other slicing and dicing decisions and go from there. But what I'd like to do is come back to this, and what I want to hone in on is from here, let's say I just want to understand a little bit more about my spend. Um, can you highlight the top three items for me to know about my spend? And what this will now do is just summarize, like, what are some things that I should care about today while I'm in this tool and trying to learn some about my spend? And very quickly, I kind of get a rundown. So you'll see we recently actually brought in some on-prem cost into our kind environment. And so that's why you're seeing kind of this big, large expense that jumped up in January. Now that's clearly called out for me. I see some overall spend growth that I might want to look into, and some additional items and recommendations here. And so for some folks, this might not be something that they need. They're already really savvy with their data and their reporting, and they know where how to get what they need. But for a lot of folks, this is kind of that intro step into what AI can do for your organizations or do for individuals. And it serves as kind of that guidance next step for a lot of folks that I think is going to be really powerful when you just think about usability and understanding your data long term. So those are my quick guidance examples for folks. And like I said, if you've got any questions here, we've got some folks that are answering questions in the chat. Feel free to ask those. But I'm now going to jump from Kion to Claude Desktop. And so for folks that may not be familiar with this, this is using Claude Desktop as one of Anthropic's offerings. And what I would highlight is that there's a concept of an MCP server, which a lot of tools and systems are coming out with, and Kion's no different. So some of the things that you've missed as kind of the prerequisites here is that Kion's MCP server is connected to this, meaning that Claude has access to Kion. It also has access to other internal tools to Kion. So things like our Notion, our Slack, and other tools that we use to do business are also connected in here, creating a little bit of that ecosystem of tools that I mentioned earlier. And I'm transitioning now into this idea of efficiency. And I want to show a couple ways that efficiency can show up. And so for many folks, AI might be a tool of, all right, my boss doesn't have time to go into a tool and, slice and dice reports. They just want something either shared with them in a link, or they want an email. How do I best get them this information when they ask me these one-off questions? And so what I've done here, just to save us a little bit of time, is I've created a prompt already that I'm going to walk us through. So as I come up here, um, my boss, let's say, came to me and said, I want to understand our unit economics for 2025. And so I came in here and asked Claude to create a cost per customer trend analysis using our 2025 spend. And I told it that it can reference Pendo to understand our customer base. And the reason I'm pointing that out is because what you see here is happening is not only is Claude grabbing spend data from Kion to understand that context, it's also grabbing from another tool, a customer count list to try to overlay those two things at the exact same time. And so, why that's really important, and I'll skip you through some of this. I go back and forth and ask Claude to add some additional context to this report that I'm going to show you all. But as I work my way through here, we finally get to the place where I was happy with it. And ultimately, in about 5 minutes, it created this interactable, if that's a word, interactable, this report that I can interact with. I can now immediately go and share this with my boss or whoever else on my team might need to see this. And this is a somewhat simple report, but it gave me what I was looking for, which is how do I compare our spend and our cost per customer? What does that trend look like over this last year? And I also asked it to go ahead and try to forecast. And what's really neat here is now, let's say my CIO wants to review this information, try to understand our trajectory for the next year. There's also these little abilities to go ahead and change the spend rate and the customer growth rate if I wanted to mess around with some of those variables. And this was created in about 5 minutes. And so this doesn't solve every reporting need, but in the case where a senior leader comes to me or comes to you and asks for a very specific report that maybe you don't have handy, or maybe you need to use multiple data sets at the same time, something like an MCP server being connected to your tools is a really powerful and really efficient way to get some of that information. The second example I'm going to show, and this one will be brief, and this is another one that I created ahead of time today, just to make sure we had enough time. This part of the presentation is still fairly new. Cloud Cowork is getting a lot of updates every single day, and there's a lot of new developments here. So this one, in some ways, is pretty forward-looking, but I want to show folks the art of possible when you're thinking about how to get more efficient in your practice. And so what I did this morning is I came into Cloud Cowork and I asked it to send me a daily alert on Slack of the top three items that I should be reviewing across my cloud estate. And I gave it some examples. So things like anomalies, budget overruns, any new accounts added, or just anything that might stand out as notable. And it asked me some clarifying questions of who it wanted that to go to. I wanted to go to myself. I wanted every morning at 8 a.m. And it went through. And ultimately, I had it send me a test example since I had it made this morning ahead of the webinar. But I want to show folks what it sent. It sent me this here. And quickly now, every morning at 8 a.m., I'm going to log into Slack where I start my every day. And I'm going to have a little digest just like this, where it's highlighting, hey, we have Databricks in our Kion environment. It's letting me know that it's seeing, an alarming trend for that spend. We also have some compliance findings. It actually gives me the very specific EC2 that's having some sort of unpatched vulnerability that I need to be investigating. And it's also giving me kind of a note on our VMware spend that we just recently brought in to Kion's environment. And so, yes, all of these things are possible in various ways. But now, just having this automated task sent to me every morning to start my day and just kind of give me the three things that I need to make sure that I'm looking into on that given day is it a really efficient, powerful way to start to get a little bit more productivity back in your day. And the use cases, I'm giving one example here, but there's a lot of versions of what this could be or what this could look like at your organization. And so I wanted to make sure I showed an example of what this might look like for folks. And now I'm going to leave the MCP server and jump back into Kion. And I'm going to start to kind of blend two use cases here for a moment and talk about efficiency and governance together. And then we'll get into a full-on mature governance example. So I'm going to open Lux back up. And one of the things that I'd like to do here is I'm actually going to highlight here quickly. So in Kion, we've brought in our Claude spend. So we talk about the idea of FinOps for AI, right? We're leaning into that here at Kion. And so you'll see here, I've got a rolling 30-day report of some internal Claude usage as this dashboard widget. And you can see it's pretty unpredictable. Some days we spend nothing, some days it shoots way up. And so I want to quickly make sure that I can better understand, all right, on the days that we're spending a little bit more money on Claude, what's going on? So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to say, one moment here. I'm going to come in and I'm going to ask Lux if it will create me a daily enforcement for my Claude project, and I want to know any day that just exceeds $10. I'm going to kick off this request. And what you should see, and I'm going to take a moment to kind of walk you through what's happening, is you'll see it's transparent about what tool calls it's going to get. It let me know that it found that Claude project. And this is an important piece here is you'll see that before it's allowed to do anything, I get to interact with this request. So I could deny, I could edit or decide I no longer want to do this, or I could hit approve. And this gives me a quick little snapshot that it's looking at this project, this threshold. And so I'm going to hit approve. And now it's going through the process of actually creating that. And here it wants a follow-up question on who should be notified. And I just want it to notify me. And great. And so now it knows to notify me. This is my user ID in the back end of the system. And after I hit approve here, great. So now I've successfully set up a daily alert to notify me anytime our Claude project exceeds $10. And just to show that in reality, I'm going to jump over here. I'm going to go to our Claude project, go to enforcements, and you now see right here is the trigger that I just set up to alert me. And so in this example, this is a kind of one specific type of example, but imagine doing this at a large scale. So imagine using Lux to, across all of your projects, start to set up, enforcements to either alert or take action on your behalf very quickly. And now I'm going to transition. I think I'm doing okay on time. I'm going to do two more examples that are specific to governance. And I recognize what I'm about to show is a little bit more of the advanced governance use case. But once again, I want folks to think about the art of the possible, not even just necessarily what's possible for you today. And I'm going to open back up Lux. And what I'm going to do in this case is, let's say I want to go and take the next step in my governance journey and I want to actually start to restrict services in my sandbox account. So what you see in this prompt here is that I have a sandbox for AI research, and we shouldn't really be spending a ton of money in it. So I actually want to shut down any further usage of AI Bedrock when we reach $100 a month in that sandbox. So I'm going to kick off this request. And this is a little bit more of an involved one, but hopefully it moves with some pace here. It's going through, grabbing all the tools that it needs. Some things I would highlight is like there are some things that are unique to Kion in this example. Like you'll see it's calling our documentation with this tool call to make sure it understands how policies and things work in Kion as a tool. It's doing some summarization and it let me know that it found the ability to restrict Amazon Bedrock and deny Bedrock as an IAM policy. And ultimately, it's giving me a summary of what it found, and I have the ability to once again deny or approve this. For the sake of today, I'm going to go ahead and hit approve. And once again, wants to know who to notify, notify me. Great. And now we should be, so it knows me, Tatum Tummins, and perfect. So it created it, gives me a summary of, and then it explains what's going to happen when that policy is triggered. And once again, just to show you how this now looks in the UI, I go to my AI research sandbox, and you're going to see here this enforced bedrock limit now on this project. And so I'm going to do one more governance example, and then I think we'll be at our time because I want to make sure we have plenty of time for Q&A. So earlier, when I talked about governance on the PowerPoint slide, I showed a use case of Lux creating a policy. And so what I'm going to do again here is I want to show that live for folks. So um, create a policy to delete my unattached EBS volumes greater than 7 days on my asthma research project. So I'm going to ask Lux to create this policy to try to clean up both the current set of EBS waste that I have, but also try to prevent that from happening long term. So it sees several asthma research projects. I only want to do this on dev since I'm asking it to delete. So I'm going to confirm with it. ID 10. Whoops, I left off the 10, but and so this is making sure that it has all the right information. You'll see that it's calling here a sub agent that's specific to Kion, where we've taught it kind of how to write policy reliably. And it's referencing that before it spits out this policy to be used. But here in just a few moments, we should have an example of that policy. And once again, it'll ask if I'd like to actually approve and implement that policy. And there we have it. So it gives me an example of what it's going to do. It's going to delete EBS volumes that are unattached, which is explaining what it's looking for, equal state available that are older than 7 days. And this is the actual policy that it wrote. And so I mentioned earlier in the PowerPoint around the power of, breaking down technical barriers and being able to deploy something like AI to create policies like this, and then ultimately start to scale and govern across your cloud environment. And so I won't approve. I think folks got the idea here of what you're able to do in terms of this workflow, but I hope these examples show you a kind of a full spectrum of, starting at the beginning of your AI journey to maybe how that can evolve into real automation and governance. And I know I went pretty quick here, but I tried to cover a couple flavors for folks to get a sense of. So what I'm going to do now is jump back into the PowerPoint and we'll just do some quick recap and then get to Q&A. So in terms of what we talked about today, uh, the state of the FinOps data has confirmed that AI has arrived both as a new way of operating and managing spend, but also as an amplifier for organizations. These use cases are available to all maturity levels across the three themes of guidance, efficiency, and governance. And then lastly, I hope you all just saw this live, but AI is accelerating outcomes. And I hope what you just saw confirms that that's not just a theoretical idea, but there are use cases that can be taken advantage of right now. And it's making FinOps easier for everyone. It's reducing some manual work, and it's ultimately enabling some better governance as well. As far as next steps for you all, find a use case that works. I've mentioned many times that this looks different for everyone on their journey, but I hope that, something today sparked an idea or gave you something that you can now take forward and just try to figure out that one process where you could potentially implement AI into your FinOps practices. And maybe it's as simple as it just using it as a guide, like we said at the beginning, or maybe it's starting to get into some of those more advanced efficiency or governance cases. But whatever it is, find something that makes sense for your organization. Um, Second, provide feedback to me. So for those of you that are on this call that you've been doing this now for months or years and you've got all kinds of use cases, I'm interested to hear those and what those are. Or if you've got questions for me on some ideas for your use cases or just want to give me feedback on the content in general, I promise I always welcome those conversations. And so reach out on LinkedIn or email me, either one. And then for those of you that found today really interesting and want to learn more about the specific AI story within Kion, that QR code on the screen will take you to a calendar where you can set up a demo and talk to us more if you'd like to do that as well. And so before I go, I want to give folks just kind of a quick update of what's going on in the world of Kion in terms of product development. To start, I want to flag for folks kind of this FinOps Plus product vision that we have here. So at Kion, we call ourselves a FinOps Plus product because we are really focused and foundationally built on these three pillars that you see here of automated governance, AI driven, which you saw a lot of today, and then managing spend beyond public cloud. And we think these are the three pillars that are going to be most important to FinOps practitioners long term. And it's really how we're orienting ourselves to help make a difference for our customers. And so, with that, if you want to look at some of our recent releases, the first being Lux, which you all saw plenty of today. We also recently released something called Financial Scopes, which is a way of just more granular metadata grouping for better showback and chargeback. We made significant improvements to our dashboard experience, and we also released dark mode, which is what I demoed in today. And then in terms of what's coming up next for us, a lot of investment in automation policies, a new Kion policy engine, and then some additional, better ways of improving cost allocation with some more granular shared cost use cases. And so that's what's new and next with us. Um, Now I'm going to try to click over and answer some questions for folks that have any. But if you don't have any questions, I do want to sincerely say before people drop, you gave me 40 minutes of your time, and I really appreciate that. Could have been anywhere for the last 40 minutes. So thank you for dropping by. Hope you found something today useful and educational. Um, so with that, I'm going to open up Q&A. So I see some notifications. Let me try to catch up here. Um, okay. So I see, okay, John, I see you typing on the one about forecast. So I'm going to skip that one. Um, so I see a question on, let's say you have new customers coming online with variables that are not 100% clear. How much data uh, will need to be stored? Um, I'm not following the question there. Is the question, I'm going to maybe assume the question there is around uh, how long until the date, like how much data do we need in Kion to be able to make some of these impacts? Um, I'm not sure if that's what that question was going for, but actually, if you don't mind, for the person who, oh, forecast. Okay, I see your update. So trying to forecast cost. Yeah. So obviously, the more data you have, the better the forecast likely is. I will say, when it comes to forecasting cost, we offer kind of a customizable ability to forecast. So let's say you bring on data into Kion and you've only got 3 months of spend. You can customize your forecast to only focus on those 3 months, or actually customize that and say, hey, I just want to look at these 14 days as kind of a true version of my run rate. So you don't necessarily need a full year of spend or anything like that to get some value out of forecasting. Um, and I see, John, you're doing great. You're typing before I can even answer on some of these. And let me see if I missed anything in the chat
Uh,
here.
you could answer that one live. That's actually a good one, maybe to answer live. I can stop typing
Yeah.
next to you.
Okay. So we just got another question. Um, are you guys looking at providing functionality for on-prem VMware environments? I saw VMware in your Slack result and was curious because of that Beyond Cloud pillar. Yes. So what you actually just saw in the demo environment is us taking some anonymized VMware data that we've put into our demo environment using a customized focus converter. So what we're doing just broadly, not just on-prem, is obviously focus is something that hopefully a lot of SaaS tools and additional tools out there are going to be making progress on offering that natively. But we're currently in that in between time where many tools don't provide a focus export. So the way that Kion's approaching that is we're actually meeting customers where they are with their critical needs, and we're developing converters for focus based on those data sets. And so you saw Claude today. There's also OpenAI spend in our demo environment. We have converters for OpenCost and MongoDB and Databricks. And then one of our newer ones, we've been working on kind of a cost model with VMware spend that is translating into focus. And so we have a version of that that works in our demo environment for this particular customer engagement. On-prem is something that typically looks a little bit different. It's not necessarily as repeatable as some of the SaaS tools, but that's something that we're definitely interested in and helping kind of meet folks where they are and bring that spend and kind of give you that single pane of glass view. And so I know that was an anonymous question, but if you wanted more details on your specific use case and if that's something we could help you bring in, please reach out and we can talk further on that. And I see John did an awesome job of answering all the questions for me while I was talking. So I see a lot of things are answered, and I think we answered in the chat or out loud all the Q&A that we got. So I really appreciate once again everybody's time, and I'm not sharing screen anymore, but my LinkedIn is just Tatum Tummins. I think I'm a one of one name wise, so you'll find me if you want to message me and talk anymore. But yeah, really appreciate everybody's time and thanks for being here today. Take care.